Today, I find myself enveloped in a situation that feels like a meticulously planned theatrical play, starring none other than me, the unsuspecting villain in Kimberly's narrative. I remember clearly how it all unfolded. There I was, Michelle Thompson, a 51-year-old housewife, standing awkwardly in the middle of what was supposed to be a joyous family gathering for Kimberly's child's introduction party. My husband Jeremy, who was 57 now, and I had brought along our young son, also named Jeremy, aged 10, who seemed to have inherited his father's calm demeanor. The room buzzed with the chatter of family members and close friends, all blissfully unaware of the brewing storm. As we entered the decorated hall, my husband, holding our son's hand, scanned the room for our seats. "Michelle doesn't have a seat, what's going on?" he inquired, his voice tinged with confusion. It was then that Kimberly, with a sly smile plastered across her face, made her intentions known. "Just family seats," she declared, her words slicing through the festive air like a knife. The realization hit me like a cold wave. Kimberly had orchestrated this entire scenario to publicly exclude me, to make it evident to everyone present that I was not considered a part of the family. How long had she been harboring such feelings? How deep ran her resentment that she would use her child's special day as a stage for this act of rejection? This wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision, it was a declaration, a culmination of years of strained relations. Since marrying her father and becoming part of their lives when Kimberly was just entering her teens, our relationship had always been rocky. Her outright declaration years ago, "You may be his wife, but you're not my mom," still echoed in my ears. I had always understood her feelings, having lost my own parents young and being raised by relatives. I knew all too well the complex emotions involved in accepting a new family member. Despite this, I tried to bridge the gap between us, to foster some semblance of familial bond. But it seemed Kimberly's heart had turned cold, hardened by years of unresolved emotions and perhaps misunderstandings about my intentions. Her actions today were proof of that. As I stood there, grappling with a mixture of hurt and disbelief, my husband's voice brought me back to the moment. "Let's go," he said, his jaw set, a clear indication that he too was deeply affected by the blatant disrespect shown not just to me, but to our family unit as a whole. Agreeing with him, I took a deep breath, ready to walk away from the hurtful scene, to protect not just my own dignity but also to shield our young son from the negative undercurrents of the family dynamics. Just as we were about to leave, disaster struck, a sudden, sharp escalation that promised to further complicate an already painful day. At the heart of our family's turmoil, there lay secrets and misconceptions, feeding into the bitterness that seemed to deepen with each passing day. The day I stood up to Kimberly marked a significant shift in our relationship. It was one of those moments that seem insignificant in the grand scheme but are, in fact, pivotal. I had always taken pride in my work at the restaurant, an establishment owned by my aunt and uncle who raised me after my parents passed away. It was more than just a job, it was a part of my heritage, a place where I learned the value of hard work and the warmth of community. I understand you may dislike me, but disparaging the job that I loved is something I won't tolerate, I told Kimberly, the frustration evident in my voice. Her response was dismissive. "It's still nightlife work. It's a lowly job." Unable to bear her scorn any longer, she stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. That night, for the first time, I thought about discussing her attitude with my husband. Yet, overwhelmed by a sudden bout of nausea, I chose to remain silent. Little did I know that nausea was the first sign of my unexpected pregnancy. Discovering I was pregnant at 40 was a whirlwind of emotions. My husband and I had resigned ourselves to the possibility of not having children of our own, especially given the delicate dynamics with Kimberly. The news of the pregnancy, however, was a joyous surprise, a precious gift that suddenly made the future look different. But when I shared the news, Kimberly's reaction was nothing short of explosive. "This was a shotgun wedding, wasn't it? I know for a fact that you and Dad were in that kind of relationship even when my mom was alive," she accused, her words cutting through the air like shards of glass. Her outburst left us stunned. "Who told you that?" "That's not true, Kimberly. There's been some misunderstanding," my husband tried to interject, but she was beyond reasoning. "Don't you dare call me Kimberly as if we're close," she snapped, her eyes burning with anger and accusation. The argument that ensued was heated and painful, with Kimberly adamantly opposing the pregnancy, saying things so harsh that my husband and I were left reeling. After things had calmed down, my husband took it upon himself to understand where these destructive ideas were coming from. It turned out that Kimberly's misconceptions were being fueled by her Aunt Samantha and her husband Edward, who had been a part of her life more so after her mother's passing. Samantha and Edward, as described by my husband, were not the most stable influences. Known for their irresponsibility and inability to maintain steady jobs, they seemed to have projected their own failures and bitterness onto Kimberly. This revelation added another layer of complexity to our already strained family dynamics. Here I was, caught in the crossfire of past grievances and present misunderstandings, trying to navigate a path forward not just for myself, but for my unborn child and a family teetering on the brink of fragmentation. As I stood at the precipice of these intertwining challenges, I realized that the journey ahead would require not just patience and love, but also an unwavering strength to stand against the winds of hostility and prejudice, hoping someday for reconciliation and peace. As I reflect on the intricate web of relationships within our family, the dynamics between Kimberly, her Aunt Samantha, and her husband Edward, and their impact on my life become all too clear. When Kimberly's mother fell ill while she was just a young girl in elementary school, my husband found himself struggling to manage her care on his own. It was during this vulnerable time that Samantha and Edward stepped in, offering their help. "Kimberly is my sister's precious only daughter, and since we're neighbors, let us help out. We don't have children, so we think of Kimberly as our own," they insisted. Believing in their good intentions, my husband allowed them to become more involved in Kimberly's life. However, over time, it became evident that their involvement was not as altruistic as it seemed. They began asking Kimberly's mother for money and gifts, exploiting the situation under the guise of familial duty. Their behavior raised suspicions and concerns, making it one of the reasons my husband considered remarrying to bring stability and perhaps a protective barrier around his daughter. After we married, I came to understand that Samantha and Edward had been planting seeds of distrust in Kimberly against me. They told her, "She's just a shady woman who flatters men, coming from the nightlife business. She had that kind of relationship with your father even when your mother was alive. You should never call such a woman Mom." These words, laced with venom, shaped Kimberly's perception of me, turning her heart colder with each passing day. Fed up with their lies and manipulation, my husband finally confronted them with a stern warning: "We've kept quiet about the small things because you were looking after young Kimberly. But if you spread lies again, we'll sue for defamation." Intimidated by the threat, Samantha and Edward scrambled to backtrack on their accusations. "It's not what we meant, we just said that not all waitresses are bad. We didn't mean Michelle. We've known her for a long time through work. That's all we meant by saying she was an acquaintance of your mother before she passed." Their excuses sounded hollow, their apologies forced, as they tried to smooth over their previous comments by adding, "And to have a honeymoon baby, you're lucky to be blessed with a child so soon." Despite their apparent attempts at rectification, the sincerity of their words was questionable at best. Yet, because they made an effort to apologize, I decided to forgive them this once, hoping it might pave the way for a more peaceful coexistence. However, the damage they had inflicted on Kimberly's view of me was deep-rooted. While the overt conflict may have been addressed, the underlying mistrust and coldness persisted. As a result, Kimberly and I continued to live under the same roof, maintaining a strained and distant relationship that seemed destined to linger indefinitely. Despite the passing years and the occasional surface-level civility, the chill in the air whenever we were together was a constant reminder of the deep-seated issues that had yet to be fully resolved. Upon entering the room, the ambience was palpably vibrant and elegantly decorated, reflecting the joy of the occasion. The walls were adorned with delicate floral arrangements, and the soft lighting gave the room a warm, inviting glow. I took a moment to absorb the scene, a well-known restaurant that was indeed hard to book, bustling with Kimberly's new family and their close associates. It was clear that her marriage into the Green Foods family had its perks, including such a prestigious venue for their baby viewing party. As We moved through the crowd. I noticed the mix of guests, which included many faces unfamiliar to me, business associates of Kimberly's in-laws, and their extended family. It was a testament to how her new life had expanded beyond our family's simpler connections. My husband Jeremy, ever the supportive presence, squeezed my hand gently as we approached our group of relatives. Among them, inevitably, were Samantha and her husband. They offered us cautious smiles, their previous transgressions hanging silently between us like a delicate truce. Despite the past tensions, today was about celebration, about the new life Kimberly had brought into the world. I reminded myself of that, pushing aside any lingering feelings of awkwardness. Kimberly, looking radiant and genuinely happy, was busy attending to guests, with her husband by her side. Observing them, I felt a twinge of something unexpected pride. Despite our difficult relationship, she had grown into a responsible adult, and now a mother. As the party progressed, the time came for the baby. Kimberly held her daughter lovingly, her actions tender and protective. It was in this moment, watching her with her child, that I saw a reflection of myself, how I had held her brother Jeremy so many years ago, with the same love and hope for the future. It was a poignant reminder of the cycles of family life, of the roles we step into and out of as time passes. When Kimberly approached us with her daughter, her manner was polite, her voice carrying a hint of warmth that had been absent before. "I'm glad you could come," she said, her eyes briefly meeting mine. It wasn't the warm embrace of reconciliation, but it wasn't the cold shoulder either. It was an acknowledgement, an olive branch perhaps, extended within the safe confines of a formal setting. I congratulated her sincerely, feeling a genuine happiness for her new role as a mother. "She's beautiful, Kimberly," I told her, and I meant it. Seeing her in this new light, as a caring mother, shifted something within me, perhaps a softening, a letting go of past grievances for the sake of this new generation we both loved. As the event continued, I chatted with other guests, enjoying the exquisite cuisine the restaurant was known for. The atmosphere was convivial, and there was laughter and joyful chatter all around. Samantha and her husband kept a low profile, and it was perhaps for the best. Today was about new beginnings, about family in all its complex, multifaceted glory. And as I watched Kimberly from across the room, interacting with her in-laws and friends, I realized that this event was not just a showcase of the new baby, but also a showcase of Kimberly herself, a woman who had grown, evolved, and was now forging her own path. It was a reminder that no matter the past, the future held possibilities for change, understanding, and hopefully, forgiveness. As the realization dawned on me that there was no seat reserved in my name at this supposedly joyous occasion, a chill ran down my spine. The room, once filled with warmth and celebration, suddenly felt colder, more hostile. I stood there, bewildered and hurt, clutching my purse like a lifeline as my husband inquired, his voice a mixture of confusion and concern, "Michelle doesn't have a seat, what's going on?" Kimberly, holding her newborn daughter close, replied with a malice that was palpable, "We're gathering the family for a celebration." Her grin was not one of joy, but one that spoke volumes of her intentions. It was clear, she was using this moment to publicly sever the familial ties that I thought we were at least pretending to maintain. "Just family seats," she declared, her eyes locking onto mine with a challenging glare. The words that followed were like a dagger to my heart. "So if you're not family, could you leave?" The audacity of her statement left me reeling, but it was her husband Scott and his parents who looked most flustered by her brazenness. Up until now, I had been tolerating her coldness, her distant behavior, because I believed in maintaining peace for the sake of Jeremy and the family. But at that moment, Kimberly pushed beyond the boundaries of decency. Amidst the shocked murmurs of the assembled guests, Kimberly continued, her voice breaking into a tearful tirade. "Father, Mother, and Scott, I've never said this before, but this woman stole my father from my real mother and wormed her way into our house." The accusation was so stark, so brutal in its delivery, that it momentarily silenced the room. All eyes turned to me, their gazes turning from surprise to judgment under her manipulative words. "My mother suffered because of it, and it shortened her life," she claimed, the weight of her words designed to inflict maximum damage. The crowd's shift in demeanor was palpable, their looks accusatory and filled with disdain. I stood there, a mixture of shock and sadness overwhelming me. For over a decade, I had tried to bridge the gap between Kimberly and myself, always hoping that with time she would see me not as an adversary but as a member of her family. Despite her resistance, I cared for her, even loved her as my own daughter, and as a sister to Jeremy. But now, Kimberly's carefully crafted narrative had painted me as the villain in her life story, an enemy, not a family member. Samantha and her husband, who had always been a thorn in our family's side, clearly played their parts in this drama too, supporting Kimberly's claims and solidifying her story to the guests. My husband, shocked and angry, immediately defended me. "There's no truth to that," he declared firmly, "it's all lies." Yet, the damage was done. The seed of doubt was planted among the guests, their faces a mix of sympathy for Kimberly and scorn towards me. It was a painfully orchestrated performance, and despite the previous apologies from Samantha and her husband, it was clear they had continued to influence Kimberly, weaving this plot to culminate at what was supposed to be a happy gathering. Their smug smirks only confirmed my suspicions. Feeling utterly betrayed and isolated, I realized just how deeply the roots of deception ran in this part of my family. The guests, completely fooled by Kimberly's convincing performance, looked on, their faces etched with concern and reproach, leaving me to stand alone amid the ruins of what I once hoped could be a loving family reunion. I stood frozen, the scene unfolding before me like a surreal drama. After Kimberly's dramatic ultimatum threatening to cut her father out of her daughter's life if he continued to support me, my husband made his stance clear. With a deep, sorrowful look at his granddaughter, he closed his eyes tightly, as if bracing against a physical blow, then turned his back to Kimberly. "Are you sure about this? You'll never see your granddaughter again," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Let's go," he declared, signaling it was time to leave the chaotic scene. As we turned to exit, a sudden commotion stopped us in our tracks. A loud "yikes" echoed through the venue, followed by Kimberly's scream. I turned back to see her face covered in cream, the remnants of the celebration cake splattered across her shocked expression. It was Jeremy, our son, his face red with anger, tears brimming in his eyes, who had thrown the cake. "Don't say bad things about Mom," he shouted. "Mom has always cared for you. Why would you say such terrible things?" Kimberly, wiping cream from her face, shot back fiercely, "Don't call me sister. I never once thought of you as my brother." Jeremy's reaction was immediate, large tears rolled down his cheeks as the weight of her words hit him. In that moment, my protective instincts surged. I wrapped my arms around Jeremy, pulling him close. "It's okay," I whispered, though my heart was breaking for him. My husband, meanwhile, took it upon himself to address the room. "I apologize for ruining what was supposed to be a celebratory occasion," he began, his voice steady but firm. "However, what Kimberly said earlier is not true. Michelle became my wife after Kimberly's mother passed away, a decision I made because she is a respectable person. I hope you can understand that." The tension in the room was palpable as he continued, "It doesn't matter why Kimberly started this, we will cut ties with her. My daughter might be imperfect, but I ask for your understanding." As we were about to exit, a new voice cut through the commotion. "I'm Michael, the owner and chef of this restaurant. I'm sorry, but I must ask everyone to leave. The party is over." The guests turned to see a man standing with an authoritative air. "I am well acquainted with Michelle Thompson. She is a fine person. I refuse to serve my food to anyone who speaks so ill of her. Please leave." Kimberly's anger flared anew at Michael's intervention. "How can you say such a thing? What's your relationship with that woman? Maybe you're also deceived by her." Michael's response was calm but firm. "I trained as a chef for many years at Michelle's Family's Inn before starting this restaurant. Yes, I've known Michelle for a long time." Michael's words caused a stir among the remaining guests, but his stance was clear. As the venue began to empty, the weight of the day's events settled around us, a mix of sadness and relief mingling in the air. We left the restaurant together, a family united by the trials we had faced, ready to move forward from the heartache and accusations, with the knowledge that those who truly knew us, understood us. Continuing from the revelations shared by Chef Michael, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted as he recounted his knowledge of the relationships and characters involved. His connection to my husband and me ran deeper than most understood, stemming from his long-standing affiliation with the inn run by my aunt and uncle where he had trained as a chef. "As you may know, I've been involved with the inn since I was a child," Michael began, his voice carrying a note of sincerity that quieted the murmuring crowd. "During that time, I saw Thomas regularly as he was a frequent visitor at the inn, always conducting himself with integrity. His relationship with everyone at the inn was strictly professional. He started as a young salesman and, over the years, progressed in his career, bringing colleagues and clients to the inn." Michael paused, allowing the guests to absorb his words, then continued. "Thomas became a widower when Kimberly's mother passed away. It was a difficult time, and like many of our regulars, we felt his loss deeply. I remember when a marriage proposal was unexpectedly brought up by a regular at the inn. It caught me off guard, especially since Thomas was known to be grieving and focused on his daughter's welfare. He looked around, ensuring he had the attention of everyone in the room. Thomas was indeed considering remarriage, but not just for the sake of his daughter Kimberly. He was concerned about the influences around her, particularly from Samantha and her husband, who he felt were not providing a healthy environment for a young girl approaching her teenage years. The idea of remarriage was initially opposed by the mediator, who was a longtime acquaintance and a regular at our restaurant. He counseled Thomas to consider his own happiness as well, not just the needs of his daughter. "If you seek a partner for the purpose of leading a happy life yourself, then I support that decision," he advised. "Marrying solely to provide a mother for his child," he argued, "would be unfair to both the child and the new partner." Thomas took this advice to heart, Michael added, his gaze now on me. He decided that if he were to remarry, it would be for love and companionship, for a genuine partnership that would naturally extend to caring for Kimberly. That's when he approached Michelle, knowing her character and her kindness from her years at the inn. The room was quieter now, the guests listening painted a picture of thoughtful decisions and genuine affection, rather than the opportunistic narrative Kimberly had presented. Thomas's decision to marry Michelle was based on respect, affection, and the understanding that she could bring warmth and stability to his and Kimberly's lives. It was not a decision made lightly or with any deceit. As Michael concluded his explanation, the tension that had blanketed the room began to lift slightly, his words offering a new perspective on the relationships that had shaped our family dynamics. It was a perspective that I hoped would resonate with the guests, offering them insight into the true nature of our family story, far removed from the manipulative portrayals that had been previously voiced. Reflecting on those tumultuous times brings a sense of clarity and purpose to my actions. The reason I chose to remarry was deeply personal, influenced by past pains and the possibility of new beginnings. Hearing Chef Michael share his insights and watching the crowd's reaction reminded me of the importance of telling my side of the story. "Yes, I was deeply conflicted," I began, addressing the guests who were now listening intently. "Years ago, I resolved never to marry again. I had been deeply hurt by someone I once thought I could spend my life with. My aunt and uncle, who raised me and supported me unconditionally, encouraged me to explore life, to study, and to work before settling down. This person, a client I met through my job, seemed like the one, and with the encouragement of my family, I engaged to them, only to have it fall apart when I discovered they were already married with children." The guests shifted uncomfortably as the weight of my past settled in the room. "When I found out, I was devastated. And to make matters worse, I was pregnant and soon after, I miscarried, possibly due to the immense stress. From that moment, I swore off marriage and even the idea of having children again." I paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. The person who introduced me to Thomas knew all of this. Yet, he believed that both of us could find happiness again. He saw something in Thomas that perhaps I hadn't considered because I knew him only as a regular customer at the inn. My aunt and uncle, understanding my hesitations, encouraged me to consider the proposal, to give myself and Thomas a chance at happiness. I looked around, meeting the eyes of the guests, some of whom had known me from the inn. As I spent time with Thomas, just the two of us, I began to see a future where I could be happy again. He understood my past, respected my boundaries, and shared his own vulnerabilities. Our relationship grew from a place of mutual respect and understanding, and after many heartfelt conversations, we decided to marry. Turning slightly, I addressed the false accusations directly. So, there's absolutely no truth to the claims that we were close while Kimberly's mother was still alive, or that she suffered because of my presence, I stated firmly. My husband nodded in agreement, adding his voice to mine. It's true, we've known each other for many years, but our relationship was strictly that of staff at the inn and a customer. If you find it hard to believe, he paused, his expression earnest, I ask that you consider the character of the person you've known me to be. The room fell silent, the tension easing as our words seemed to resonate. It was a moment of vindication, but more importantly, it was a moment of truth. As the guests processed our testimonies, I hoped that they would see the sincerity and honesty in our relationship, understanding that our union was built not out of convenience or deceit, but from a genuine connection and a shared hope for a future filled with happiness and mutual respect. As the commotion unfolded, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions swirling within me. The mention of the chairman, who had played a pivotal role in bringing my husband and me together, seemed to solidify our standing in the eyes of many at the party. It was a reminder that not all connections were made with hidden agendas, some were genuinely rooted in goodwill and the desire to see others happy. Michael's assertion that the accusations against us were unfounded seemed to resonate with the crowd, visibly shifting the atmosphere towards sympathy and understanding. Scott, Kimberly's husband, appeared deeply regretful as he absorbed the revelations and the consequences of the quick judgments made by himself and his parents. It appears we were too quick to believe only Kimberly and her aunt and uncle's side of the story, he admitted, his expression somber. The in-laws, too, echoed this sentiment, reinforcing their belief in our integrity. Their change in stance was a relief, yet it underscored the precarious nature of relationships and how quickly they could be swayed by misinformation. Michael, sensing the tension, then suggested, perhaps it's best to call it a night. Yes, that's a good idea, everyone. We apologize for causing such a disturbance today. His handling of the situation with such professionalism and respect for all guests underscored his integrity and commitment to his principles, not just as a chef but as a person. At Scott's request, Michael instructed his staff to begin packing the food into takeout containers, offering the guests a chance to take the feast home despite the abrupt end to the festivities. This act of hospitality, even in the face of disruption, demonstrated a graciousness that was deeply ingrained in Michael's character. However, when Samantha and her husband attempted to collect their share of the food, the staff politely refused them. The refusal was a clear signal that their actions and deception were unacceptable, and there would be consequences. I'm sorry, but we cannot provide anything for you. From now on, we will not be associating with you in any manner, one of the staff members informed them firmly. Their response was predictably indignant. This restaurant is kicking out customers with such disrespect. We'll sue you for this. That's right, we are the aunts and uncles of today's star. You should treat us better. We'll leave the worst review online, Samantha and her husband protested loudly, their voices filled with anger and disbelief. Scott, quick to mitigate further embarrassment, hurried over to aid the commotion and promptly escorted them out. The threat of a lawsuit seemed almost laughable in its desperation, and I couldn't help but think how such actions might backfire on them instead. Their desperate outcry to be treated as important guests, despite their deceitful behavior, was almost pitiable. As the evening drew to a close, Kimberly's in-laws approached us with genuine apologies. They had been misled by Kimberly and her aunt and uncle, believing their fabricated story about my unpopularity. We had no idea Kimberly and Samantha and her husband were plotting such a thing, they confessed, clearly embarrassed and regretful for the unwelcome drama and the strain it caused on our relationship. This night, tumultuous as it was, ended with a clearer understanding among the remaining guests and family members. While it was painful to experience such public betrayal, The support that eventually emerged from the truth being revealed was a small comfort. It reminded us that integrity and honesty often prevail, even in the face of deceitful tactics and manipulation. Upon hearing Scott's update, a mixture of relief and skepticism washed over me. It was a complicated emotion, knowing that Kimberly had finally confessed the full extent of Samantha and her husband's manipulation to her in-laws. The scheme they concocted was audacious, driving me out to take over our house, positioning themselves as managers while collecting a salary from Kimberly. The depth of their deceit was staggering, and it illuminated just how far they were willing to go for their own benefit. Scott explained that Kimberly had agreed to strict conditions to avoid divorce. She was to sever all ties with Samantha and her husband, and any breach of this agreement would lead directly to divorce proceedings. Scott had prepared both an agreement and divorce papers, which he was keeping on file as a precaution. This measure, while severe, seemed necessary to protect Kimberly and her family from further harm. The revelation of these details made me reflect on the entire saga that had unfolded. From the joyous expectations of a family gathering to the dramatic fallout, the range of emotions and events had been extreme. I felt a profound sadness for Kimberly, despite everything. She had been manipulated by those she trusted, led to believe that they had her best interests at heart when, in reality, their intentions were self-serving. As my husband and I left the restaurant, the air felt different, lighter somehow, as if we were stepping out from under a heavy burden. We were grateful to Michael for his support and planned to return to his restaurant to properly express our gratitude. His intervention had been crucial in turning the tide of public opinion and revealing the truth. At home, my husband took definitive steps to cut all ties with Kimberly. Watching him delete her contact information and block her phone numbers was difficult. The thoroughness of his actions made me uneasy, yet I understood the necessity. It was a protective measure, not just for us, but for Jeremy as well, shielding him from further hurt and disappointment. The drive to completely sever ties with Kimberly was a hard choice, laden with mixed emotions. It felt like an end to an 11-year saga that had brought us as much pain as it had moments of joy. I felt released from a heavy, lingering curse, refreshed and ready to move forward with a lighter heart. This drastic step marked a new chapter for us. Our family would now be just my husband, Jeremy, and me. It was a bittersweet resolution, acknowledging that our daughter Kimberly, as we knew her, was now a part of our past, not our future. But in this newfound quiet, there was a sense of peace, a belief that we were doing what was necessary for the well-being of everyone involved. Over the past 3 years since the tumultuous showcase event, our lives have taken paths we never expected. We learned that Kimberly, unable to sever her ties with Samantha and her husband despite the clear conditions set by her in-laws, was caught meeting them secretly. This breach of trust led to her divorce, and she was subsequently expelled from the Green family. Her daughter now remains in the care of her in-laws, with Kimberly not allowed any visitation rights. It's a sad turn of events that Kimberly, who once looked down on my work at the inn, now finds herself in a similar position, working at a countryside inn. The irony of the situation isn't lost on me. The job she once deemed unworthy is now her means of livelihood. It's unfortunate, yet it's the consequence of her choices. Whether she finds redemption in this hard physical work or continues to view it with disdain, we may never know. For us, it's a chapter closed, a connection severed, perhaps forever. In my heart, I bid farewell to Kimberly, whom I once considered as my daughter. In an effort to fully move forward, we made significant changes. We sold our house and moved away, creating a new life far from past pains. My husband resigned from his former job and joined me at my aunt's inn, bringing his expertise as a salesman to our family business. Together, we've helped the inn flourish even more, gaining recognition not just nationally but internationally, similar to Michael's restaurant. As the new landlady of the inn, I dedicate myself to daily training and management, ensuring our family business continues to thrive. Interestingly, Jeremy, now 13 years old, has shown a keen interest in management. While young and his interests may change, I hold on to some hope that he might one day want to take over. He's already showing great potential to be a wonderful successor, which fills me with pride. My husband often comments on Jeremy's growth, saying, "You've raised him to be such a kind and honest boy. Thank you, you're truly a wonderful mother." To which I respond, feeling the warmth of his appreciation, "Yes, he certainly will make a great successor. He's your son, after all. Thank you for being such a great father." Our life now is about finding happiness in our state of mind, pursuing our passions with pure hearts and clear intentions. As we walk this new and bright path together as a family of 3, hand in hand, with smiles on our faces, it feels like we are on a continuous journey. A journey not just of business and personal growth, but of healing and moving forward together. No matter what the future holds, we are ready to face it together.